12 of the fantasy baseball season, and he has a few hitters I look to drop this week. The first guy, Brandon Crawford of the San Francisco Giants. So Crawford, he was an MVP candidate last season, finishing in the top 5 in the voting, but this season's been a train wreck, and now with the knee inflammation, there's no reason really to hold on to him on your fantasy roster. On the season, only 5 home runs, 30 RBIs, 26 runs scored, a stolen base, a 224 average, and a 313 on base here for Crawford. So Crawford, he was in a slump most of the season, but he was starting to get out of it a little before going down with injury. So the last few games here for him before he went out: June 18th at the Pirates, 2 for 5, 2 RBIs. June 19th at the Pirates, 1 for 3. June 20th at the Braves, 0 for 1. And June 21st at Atlanta, 1 for 1, with a run in an RBI in that one. And then June 24th, he came back 0 for 3 and re-aggravated it. So right now, Crawford, he's going to be out. Still owned in 40% of fantasy leagues, and he just wasn't contributing this season here, and even got dropped down to 8th in the lineup for the San Francisco Giant team. So right now, with the injury and the poor season so far, the first 12 weeks of the year, Crawford's definitely a player I would drop. I wouldn't say totally forget about him, but he's a guy to keep an eye on if he could come back and play good baseball. But right now, I wouldn't need to stash him, I think, on my injured list, and I even just dropped him in one of my leagues and picked up Nico Horner, who's been playing good baseball. The next guy, Harrison Bader of the St. Louis Cardinals. So Bader, another guy as well on the injured list here with plantar fasciitis, and we know that's a bad foot injury. That's a nagging injury, and it just takes a lot of time for it to heal on its own, and especially a guy with Bader's skill set with speed, stealing bases, and playing a great outfield. So on the season here for Bader, 5 home runs, 21 RBIs, 35 runs scored, 15 stolen bases, a 256 batting average, and a 303 on base. But even before he went down, the last few weeks, his numbers really dropped off. No home runs, 2 RBIs, 5 runs, a stolen base, a 239 average, and a 300 on base here for Harrison Bader. So right now, plantar fasciitis, like I mentioned, isn't good. And obviously, he's a guy that relies on his speed and his legs. And if he's not going to be doing that, and he's going to be out a while, there's no reason for fantasy owners to hold on to him. And right now, he's owned in way too many fantasy leagues at 60%. So the last few games here before he went on the injury list: June 20th at the Brewers, 0 for 3. June 21st at the Brewers, 0 for 4. June 22nd at the Brewers, 0 for 4. June 23rd at the Brew Crew, 0 for 1. June 24th versus the Cubs, 1 for 3. June 25th versus the Cubs, 1 for 2 with a run. And June 26th, 0 for 4. So he was slumping big time over the last week before he went out with injury as Bader. And with the two factors, the injury and the slump, he's definitely a guy I would drop. But he's also another guy who I could revisit down the line here. The next guy is Ezekiel Duran of the Texas Rangers. So Duran, one of the top prospects in the Rangers system, just got optioned down to the minor leagues on Saturday here, and he was a decent pickup over the last few weeks, and I even mentioned him over the last few weeks here in Week 10 and Week 11, but now going down to the minor leagues, and who knows when he's going to come back up. I don't think I would stash him on my bench here or on my NA list if you play that in your fantasy league. So Duran, in a small sample size that he was up in the majors with Texas, 2 home runs, 8 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, 9 runs scored, a 258 average, and a 281 on base, and only 62 at-bats. And he did have 17 strikeouts as well. So he was a high strikeout guy. His on-base to batting average ratio wasn't good. And the Rangers, I think they saw enough with him for now that they don't think he's deemed ready for the major leagues. And he had good versatility as well, second, third, and short for fantasy owners. But right now, wasn't in the cards for the Rangers to give him an extended run before calling him down. And now with him in the minors, he's definitely an easy player to drop this week, and hopefully he's back later in the season and he can improve and help fantasy owners and the Texas Rangers. The next guy is Eduardo Escobar of the New York Mets. So Escobar, a big free agent signing for the Mets in the offseason, signing a 2-year, $26 million deal. And Escobar, he just hasn't lived up to the expectations as well. 6 home runs, 30 RBIs only, 30 runs scored, an awful 225 average, and a 283 on base. And over the last 2 weeks here, he's been a train wreck. Only 1 homer, 6 RBIs, a run scored, a 114 average, and a 132 on base. So right now, Escobar, I know last season had a great year with the Brewers and the Diamondbacks split 28 and 90, but this season with this Met team that's in first place, he's just not getting anything going. I know he's got great versatility in fantasy baseball. First, second, and third he qualifies at, but he's owned in way too many fantasy leagues at 51%. No doubt about it, he could get on a hot streak and get going, and his power is definitely legit. But I just haven't seen it this season here with Escobar. And he's another guy that's been dropped down in the Met lineup to 7th recently. June 19th versus Miami, 0 for 4. June 20th versus Miami, 1 for 3 RBIs. June 21st at the Stros, 1 for 4 with a homer and RBI. June 22nd at Houston, 1 for 4. June 24th in Miami, 0 for 3. June 25th in Miami, 1 for 4 with an RBI. And June 26th at the Marlins, 0 for 4. So right now the Mets open a series once again with the Houston Astros. But there's no reason to think Escobar is going to get out of this slump. And with runners in scoring position, he's been horrible this season here as Escobar. But he's another guy that we know he could get hot in a month and make his season off of that with his stats. But right now, there's no reason to hold on to him in 10 or 12 team leagues. And the fifth and final hit I will to drop this week is Manuel Margaret of the Tampa Bay Rays. So Margaret, he got off to a great start this season, but he's been injury plagued as well. And now he got placed on the 60-day injured list here with a injury. And it's not an ACL they're reporting, but now he's going to be out minimum till mid-August. So on the season here for Margaret, he was off to a great start. 3 homers, 27 ribs, 21 runs scored, 5 stolen bases, a nice .302 batting average, and a .365 on base. So right here was a good factor for this Tampa Bay Ray team here. Getting on base, hitting for a great average, showing not great power. Even last season, only 10 home runs and 421 at-bats, but he was doing everything else pretty good for fantasy owners. But now with this 60-day injured list stint here for Margaret, there's no reason to keep him on your fantasy team. And he's going to be out a long time. So the last few games before he went out, June 15th at the Yankees, 2 for 3 with a run and a rib. June 16th at the Yankees, 0 for 4. June 17th at Baltimore, 1 for 1. June 18th at Baltimore, 1 for 5 with a run and 2 RBIs. June 19th at Baltimore, 0 for 4. And June 20th versus the Yankees, 1 for 4 with an RBI. So he's been out since June 20th. And there's no timetable for his return. And with the move to the 60 days, it's a no-brainer to drop him this week. So that's a few hitters I will look to drop here in Week 12 of the fantasy baseball season.